Welcome to the Gold Newsletter Podcast, your bank of knowledge of investments, economics, and geopolitics. Go to goldnewsletter.com for our publications and archives to increase your wealth monetarily and educationally.
This is Fergus Hodgson with the Gold Newsletter Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. I'm excited about today's show. We have two amazing guests joining us, and we're going to discuss individualism in an age of identity politics. We have a colleague of mine, Paz Gómez. She is the co-founder and academic director of Libre Razón, a think tank in Quito, Ecuador. She's also a contributor to the American Institute for Economic Research and a Young Voices advocate. Paz studied international relations and I think translation at San Francisco University of Quito. And then we also have Mamela Flor, and she is born in Ecuador, raised in Florida, now lives in Buenos Aires, and she has a host of titles. She's a columnist with the Pan Am Post, a member of Fundación Libre, a think tank based in Cordoba, Argentina, and a founding member of the Cuban Libertarian Party. What a power-packed list we have. So thank you both for joining the show.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us. Thanks.
Right on. Now, you guys have come to my attention. I mean, I work with Paz, but also I knew her long before that as well. And Mamela, just for your maybe outspoken views, particularly on gender or just being your own person, thinking independently. And this is such a problematic topic because I see people all the time. There are these assumptions that you must have some allegiance to a group and not think for yourself. And I've been, I guess, fighting this or just avoiding this for as long as I've been alive as an adult. But so why don't we go with Mamela? What motivated you to become so outspoken on the topic of individualism as opposed to being identity politics, particularly feminism? I know that's your big topic that you oppose, perhaps.
Okay, sure. The fact that in any group you're in, you tend to be a minority, and you see how group mentality or hive mentality, in reference to bees, collectivizes people in such a way that they behave like thugs if they see you as small. Growing up in the U.S., I lived that. I grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood where there was actually a year where anyone who was white was beaten.
Sorry. Beat a white boy day? What is it called?
Yeah, it was called Cracker Day.
Oh, lovely. Okay. So Cracker Day taught you all about group dynamics, yeah?
Exactly. And since I'm very pale and have blue eyes, I was not very welcomed in the Latino community because also it's you have to fulfill certain stereotypes, and I didn't fit in, so I wasn't perceived as white because I wasn't American, but I wasn't perceived as Latino because I was too pale.
That's so weird. I mean, obviously in Argentina, it's a different form of Latino maybe, in that people are much more European looking. But it's right. I have seen these claims. For example, there'll be, I don't want to make this political, but there was a group, Latinos for Trump, and I just saw all these people attacking them as the whitest Latinos around, and I thought, that's just so, so kind of collectivist in orientation. So you felt the pinch as being maybe not necessarily fitting into any stereotype to begin with. So you recognized how these groups can kind of dominate or hurt other people.
Exactly, and it's not only the group identity, but also the politics. As a girl in the U.S., I went to a class called TEAM, Teaching Enrichment Activities to Minorities.
Oh dear.
So you only had access to these programs according to your ethnicity.
Yeah, okay. And what did you learn in these TEAM classes?
It was actually amazing. We had an outstanding education, but if you were a WASP, what they call,
right,
you couldn't go.
Well,
so
I'm out of luck on that one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing, and this really drives these types of attitudes because it's promoted institutionally. And then gender-wise, I just applied the same principle. I feel that feminism treats women like victims and men like the enemy, and no matter how polite they want to make it, that's how it is. And this really facilitates Marxism because what it does is divide the classes into oppressed and oppressors, and I won't have it.
Sure. Okay. Paz, do you want to respond to any comments from Mamela before you share your own story?
I think that Mamela's experience has, she has more approach to certain communities that can be marginalized. In my case, it was my first approach to this thing of identity politics was gender and feminism. I think that I was always interested in politics and social thinkings and things like that. So I began researching and looking for that when I was young, when I was a teenager. And when I have a lot of members in my family that are feminists, and I began to follow and read them and things like that. But I was not convinced of what they are saying, and this like disagreement between women and men and all these things. So I began to research a little bit more. Then I had my own experience since I became a young mother. And when I became a young mother, I began to hear people saying like, you can demand the father of your daughter and things like that. But I was not still sure of what people were saying. So then I realized that the only way to become an independent woman and the only way to confront any challenge you have in life is to become free and to become sure of what you do. And that is not by taking privileges of government or privileges of certain communities, but by being yourself and pursuing your own ends in a free way. So then I began to explore more. I became libertarian, and I began to explore more and see that, for example, here in Ecuador, you have a lot of indigenous communities, and there are plenty of people that have gained, for example, scholarship and things, but not necessarily because of what they are or their talents, but because of their race, for example. And in some way, you are not taking advantage of the intellectual or the talents you have in your country, but just because of the conditions of people. And that is not always effective. And it's not the ingredient you need to, for example, become a more developed country or things like that. That's the way I began advocating and writing on these things.
One question that immediately comes to mind is that, I mean, obviously you two have gone your own way, and sometimes I think that's actually a harder way to go, that you have to be tougher to stand alone. But there's a saying my late mother used to say to me, that beggars cannot be choosers. So if you're always putting your hand out for things, you can never be authoritative as to your own choices because you have to accept what is given to you. And that's one reason why both of you have impressed me, that you're obviously supremely independent, and that means you can speak for yourselves. You don't rely on others. But why do you think that this identity politics of falling into the collectives is just so appealing or attractive? Why does it just resonate so strongly? So, Mamela, do you want to take that?
Sure. I think it's a matter of the interpretation of justice. So you know something's wrong with society. So if you have no knowledge in economy, you just figure the simple solution is that you have to take it from someone to give it to something else, to someone else. If, like I said before, it's this whole Marxist mindset. So if some have something because others don't, you have to apply policies that give and take. And then if you take this from genders or to ethnicities or to race groups, it's just the same principle. And then the problem is that, like Paz said, there's no talent or merit-based system. It's just you get assigned, and like you said, you create beggars because you're just waiting for their ration.
This topic of kind of special treatment of different people has impacted my life, because when I was in New Zealand, which is, I'm not sure, it's a British colony, I'm not sure how familiar people are with it, but I wanted to be a radio host, a podcaster in my youth, and I didn't know how to become one. And there happened to be a community radio station for people to get started, but I was not either a woman or a minority, and I was supremely frustrated, as you might imagine. And so I felt the treatment so directly, and at that time I didn't get to start a show. I didn't know how to get started. Okay, but Paz, why should people, seeing those, let's say, scholarships, you gave the example the example of scholarships for certain indigenous groups in Ecuador. Why should people not go for those? What are the benefits to actually becoming more self-sufficient, perhaps?
For example, in the scholarships, that is a clear example. You are pursuing some academic studies and then to make a career in something that you are good for. And I'm not saying that any people that applies to a scholarship due to minority populations is not talented for, but if that person is so talented and has the merit to get that scholarship, that person could be able to achieve that scholarship in the same way that other people do. Now, for example, if you have a problem of education that this person cannot achieve the scholarship because of his level of education, now in that case, it's a little bit different. But for example, if that person is not enough good in English, that person should be responsible to look for a solution in that. And the thing is that if you, for example, if that person goes into this, degree and goes with a lower level of English, for example, that their performance is not going to be the same or better than a person that have the level of English. So those things simply are not going to produce, or he's not going to give the same that the other person, and that is not effective. So yes, we live in a world that and in countries that don't have the same level of opportunities and things like that. But we also have to face those challenges and accept those differences. The thing is that when we look these groups and marginalized groups, and we just keep marginalizing those groups, even with privileges, we are not developing equality of opportunities neither.
Do you want to rub elbows with the best minds in the precious metals and mining industry? You can on the Money, Metals, and Mining Cruise from May 28th to June 7th, 2018. Explore the jewels of the Mediterranean while discovering the latest strategies to successfully invest in precious metals and mining stocks. It's a perfect blend of adventure, learning, and luxurious leisure aboard the Crystal Serenity, always a popular destination. Cabins will sell out fast. Call cruise experts at 800-797-9519 to learn more, or visit our website, goldnewsletter.com/cruise.
Mamela, you mentioned this team program, and you said you got a great education, a great support out of it. So do you think people should? I mean, let's just say we agree that it's not right, or there should not be preferential treatment to certain minority groups or people who look different. But as someone who just happens to be one, you think it's just prudent to accept that support?
No, not at all, because what you do is create this violence that is so predominant. I mean, if you look at the school shootings, all of the school shootings in the United States have been in public schools, precisely because public schools promote this group identity. So if you're not part of the group, you're out of the group and you're an enemy. And this creates violence. Another thing I would like to add to what Paz said is that you're undermining people. So you're treating them as if they're a handicap that needs a ladder to climb. And it's really undermining other people. It's not making them equal. It's saying, since you're less, we'll give you more. One
epiphany I had on this problem of, I guess, handouts or welfare payments is that came again from New Zealand when you're a student in New Zealand, if you're 25 or older or your parents earn under a certain amount, you actually just get welfare for being a student. It's crazy. I mean, I don't support this, of course. But when I turned 25, I had this decision. Was I to just reject this free money? And my father was very angry. He said, Fergus, we pay all these taxes. You're going to take that money, right? And so what happened is that I think it was about $220 a week, so a considerable amount of money to have just cash in the hand. So what happened was that naturally I was always I was side hustling while I was a student, and I was making money, and it was dollar for dollar reduced. It would reduce my welfare dollar for dollar, so the disincentive to actually work and be creative was enormous. And I got so frustrated. That was one of the reasons why at the time my head was exploding, because I wanted to be a top performer, and I felt like all the incentives were against me, and I eventually just left New Zealand. But Paz, I mean, you've obviously had a much tougher road than I have. I mean, you've spoken against maybe protections for mothers or special support for them. Hasn't that gone against your own, well-being or how can I put it, economic situation?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, of course. Maybe I can get benefited from those policies and opportunities that you have. But at the end of the day, those opportunities or those policies are not going to, let's say, fix my life completely. And they are not guaranteeing you a stability. So the only way I can guarantee a stability for myself, for example, is to study, work. And yes, it's not a difficult way to go. But for example, if I or any other mother only wait for receiving the pension from the father of their children, that is not sure. Maybe he is not going to have work, or he's not willing to pay that, and you're not going to have economic stability. You're not going to pursue your own wishes and the wishes that your daughter or any of their children have. It's just like the other people. For example, in just thinking on the labor market for women, you are reducing competition and you're reducing incentives for mothers or the women that are not mothers to compete in the labor market with the same conditions. Because, for example, yes, our mothers have better conditions or can be undermined due to these policies. And for example, enterprises want like to have mothers working, or for women that can be mothers, just because they are going to face different conditions, economic conditions for them.
Yeah, I see that's just basically an unseen effect, that when you give special protections for mothers, that makes employers more concerned about hiring them, because then they can't fire them, for example, if they get pregnant or something. Mm-hmm. These things are, I guess, not supposed to be spoken about, but if a woman is pregnant, naturally she's going to have to devote time to that, and it'll impede her, work involvement. So, and one thing I should just note about Paz, that I hired her to work with me as my assistant a couple of years ago, and now she is more independent. She's a policy analyst, but she has basically decided that rather than depending upon the father, for example, she has just devoted herself to becoming a more prominent writer, commentator, and also a beautiful digital media processor. She does all sorts of images or memes, and so she's just built her own talents, her creative capacity, and made herself more valuable, and that has given her a stronger standing. I know, Mamela, what are the topics that you're writing on now that you write on this, so it's become even more than just a personal decision? What made you then make the switch to actually speaking against this? Because it's become almost like a profession for you now.
Yeah, and I'd also like to praise Paz, and that's one of the main reasons why I don't like what feminism represents, because of how it demeans motherhood. Because it assumes it to be a social imposition when it's actually just a natural function, which of course you can choose or not to do. I would love to, but it hasn't happened yet.
Sure.
So what I do is exactly that, speak about the difference between science and fiction, so to speak, because there are actually now doctorate degree theses that say that science is sexist because it's not subjective. Yeah,
sure,
because it's not
sure.
subjective.
I've heard that mathematics is also sexist and racist. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that's how insane this is getting. I write a lot about this, and I'm going to give a TED talk in June.
Beautiful. What is the TED event?
It's TEDx in Cuenca, Ecuador. I'm going to speak about precisely how to avoid this victim ideology that is. I'm going to do it in such a way that it's not so openly against feminism. It's going to be called Violence is Genderless. And how, if we apply language the wrong way, we promote this victim ideology. There's going to be some martial arts in it. It's going to be very fun.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you're returning to your native land. So you can follow Mamela at the Pan and Post, and then also support the Cuban Libertarian Party. I mean, Mamela has so many projects going on; it's amazing. And Paz, yeah, her organization is the Libre Razón, and her columns or articles are with both the American Institute for Economic Research and Antigua Report. And Paz, do you have any final comments to add? Maybe something you've missed?
Well, I could say that individualism is facing a challenging moment right now, because what collectivism advocates is what is generally accepted as politically correct. So I guess that what we work and since I have seen the work of Mamela and what I try to do too, is to send a message that we should empower ourselves, that the experience of oppression is not the same for anyone, even if you are marginalized in some way, if you are just women or if you are black men or black women and things like that, you're not living the same experience of oppression. So the only thing that we work on is that we have to face with identity politics that creates a stronger sense of belonging between these communities and include ideology and power issues into those communities. And that is very difficult. But the only way to work against that is to empower ourselves that we are free and that we can be independent and we have the capacity to do so.
Right. And Mamela, one question. I have an article in mind from Paz that I would like to share with the show notes, but is there any particular article you've written that you think touches upon individualism and it's kind of like a greatest hit of your archive? In English, ideally, if you have it in English. I mean, we can share a Spanish one.
I think it is. I'll send it to you. It's how we've turned Martin Luther King's dream into a nightmare, because he dreamt that one day we would all be treated as equals, and we're not. We're actually, our differences are making us into institutional victims or oppressors.
Wow, that's intense. Okay, two amazing women, special to me. I really appreciate your perspectives, and I hope we can have you back on the show one of these days. So thanks again for your time.
Can I add a final thought?
Go for it, Mamela. You've got the floor is yours.
Thanks. I wanted to compliment Paz's last point. The fact that the feminism as a whole fights against the patriarchy, it actually fights against the father figure. And what it does is it's turning the state into a provider and is like fulfilling that role. So all these programs for single mothers, instead of helping children, what they're doing is producing fatherless homes and increasing violence, because it's been scientifically proven that the presence of a father increases empathy. And people with no empathy do harm because they don't feel any type of compassion towards others.
Ouch, you're breaking my heart right now. Okay, so I tried to end up on a
school shooting.
Yeah, I tried to end on a positive note, but we'll take that one.
No, well,
yeah.
Well, the positive note could be that exactly that. We are individuals, and like Paz said, everyone is marginalized in a certain way, be it socially or institutionally, and we're all unique. So our uniqueness adds more to the market, to society, than being part of a group that doesn't represent us.
Right. Okay, folks, go to the show notes. It's just goldnewsletter.com/podcast, and of all these details down there, you want to follow Mamela and Paz, who do such great work.